You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Is MJ Melendez finally breaking out after a slow start? Can Maikel Garcia get even better than he is right now? And let's look ahead to what's on deck for the Kansas City Royals. All of that is coming up next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen every day. And as you know by now, you can always check us out on those podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and you can find us on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. But if you don't want to go through that outlet, you can always just follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. I tweet out the links every single day, so you never have to worry or hassle about going and looking for them. Before we dive into MJ Melendez, let's give a shout out to today's title sponsor in Gametime. Now, I'm going to be going to the game this weekend against the St. Louis Cardinals on Saturday. And you know where I got my tickets? I got them on Gametime because it's the easiest app to use. It's stress-free. Yes, I did buy these tickets a little bit beforehand, but you can go up to the last minute if you want to. I know this year in Kansas City, the Royals are playing at a level where tickets are, tough to get. They're too expensive. But it doesn't matter if it's a Royals game. It could be a comedy show. It could be tickets to anything, really, a concert, whatever you want it to be. Gametime has you covered. It's so easy to use, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit here in about 15 minutes or so. To kick off the show today, I wanted to talk about MJ Melendez because what he's been doing since the All-Star break is, I think, something that a lot of us anticipated from him to begin the year. And MJ Melendez is in a difficult spot for this team. He's a young player. You want to believe he fits this core. But after the first half, I think a lot of us were second guessing. A lot of us were doubting how he fits in. Because last year, I think it was easy to pencil him into the future because he was a catcher. And we knew that Salvador Perez wasn't getting any younger. And he just felt like the best pick here to be the backstop behind the plate for Royals pitching. And that was until Freddie Fermin emerged a little bit, because prior to Freddie Fermin, there was no catching depth in the organization. So MJ Melendez automatically had a spot in the future. Once Salvador Perez is done catching, that job is going to go to MJ Melendez. And then we found out that MJ Melendez is not very good behind the plate defensively. He was one of the worst framing catchers in baseball. The Royals had two of the worst defensive catchers in baseball last year. So when the Royals entered 2023, I think they had in the back of their minds that if it doesn't work out for MJ, he was working incredibly hard in the offseason, working with Paul Hoover, how to set up better, how to position himself better, how to work on framing. And early on in the season, we saw it work out well. But I'm sure in the offseason, the Royals had this fail-safe, I guess you could say. They had this net to fall into. If it doesn't work out for him behind the plate, where are we going to move him to? Because he's too young, and this team's nowhere near contention to just say, okay, bye-bye, you're done. They're not near contention where they have really the authority to do that. They don't have the luxury of just cutting a 24-year-old player. So they looked at MJ Melendez and said, he's incredibly athletic. He's got a great arm. Where can that fit? At third base, that feels like a bit of a stretch because that is a really difficult position to learn, but he's athletic enough where I think he can learn the outfield. So Melendez starts figuring out how to play the outfield, right field, left field. There wasn't much experience down in AAA. There were a couple of spots he played. He played some third base. It was not very pretty. He played left field. He played right field. And then the Royals brought him up to Kansas City. But prior to that, it was predominantly catching and focusing on hitting. Now, he enjoyed a power surge in 2021. He was in the International Home Run Derby. He's hitting home runs off a boat dock. He's got the swagger, the big chain, the bandana, the backwards hat. It looked like, by all accounts, this is a guy you can kind of bank on to be that flair of your team, the bat flips, of just the tremendous raw power he has. But this year, it was a totally different story in 2023. Totally different story. And I always go back, and I think that young players, they're more mental than anything. There's some stars that surpass that, but usually it's a lot of mental stuff. And MJ Melendez came up on opening day, packed house, sold out crowd at Kauffman Stadium, the only sold out crowd I believe they've had all season long. I know they've had some pretty big crowds on promotional nights, but this was a sold out crowd on opening day against the Minnesota Twins. He comes up in a big spot, bases juiced, and he rolls into a double play. And yes, it's one game of 162. It is microscopic for what the marathon is in Major League Baseball. But it was a mentally damaging thing, I believe, because then you see on Twitter everybody coming down on MJ. Oh, he's got no approach. He's terrible. That's how quickly people can flip on you. And then he struggles. April, May, June, early July. But what I loved about MJ Melendez, and I'm going to stand by this, he never just sat there and complained or moaned and whined about it. He has constantly, all season long, tried to improve his approach. There have been multiple stories come out. Andy Rogers does a great job at MLB.com covering the Royals. Had a good story about how he'd been working tirelessly, multiple hours, countless hours in the batting cages trying to perfect his swing. He's working defensively. I mean, it's not just an easy thing to transition a catcher to an outfield spot. It's a lot easier said than done. And he's having to learn right field and left field, two of the most difficult positions to learn in baseball, especially for guys that have no experience there. But at the plate, I think he's been so willing to learn, so willing to adapt, which is why I'm rooting for him. And there was this story, and more so a lot of work on Twitter by some people. I think it was Josh Kaiser over at One Royal Way that tweeted this out. I apologize if it's not, but it was about hand placement of where MJ Melendez had moved his hands in his batting stance. And in the first half, he had it resting on his shoulder. Now it's a little bit more upright. His bat's a little bit more still. And here's the numbers of Melendez since the All-Star break. It's from Jake Eisenberg, one of the broadcasters for the Royals. In 24 games and 97 plate appearances, he has a triple slash of 281, 340, 551, 4 doubles, 6 home runs, 10 RBIs, a 7.2% walk rate, a 23.7% K rate, a 270 ISO, and a 137 WRC+. That, by every single measure, is tremendous. That I can live with MJ Melendez and deal with the defense. If the defense never improves, those are numbers I can live with. It's a small sample size. It's less than 100 plate appearances. He's got to extrapolate that over about 250, 300 if he's going to be an all-star type player, which when you're this young, you can always hope for that. But if MJ Melendez can finish out this year, I guess bordering around that, it'll make me completely forget about the first half. I get it, right? When you're struggling and the team's losing, that's important early on. And when you're playing really well, when the team's out of contention, maybe it doesn't matter. To me, it does. I think young players, as I said, are very mental. They need the confidence. They need the positivity. And I've been impressed with how MJ Melendez has fixed his approach. Like I said with Michael Massey on Twitter, Melendez is a guy that's easy to root for. He's always smiling in the clubhouse. He's constantly working on himself. We only see one side of the player. Most of us only see one side of the player. And you just see the guy that performs on TV. He doesn't play well. Oh, the guy sucks. He doesn't try. He doesn't care. No, a guy that's willing to learn different positions, constantly change his approach, constantly change his stance to get better, that's a guy that's easy to root for. And that's a guy that is working his tail off to better himself. And now we're seeing it pay off in the second half. Hoping for continued success for MJ Melendez over the final 45 games or so. All right, another guy I want to talk about is not so much in the same boat as MJ Melendez. He hasn't really struggled since coming up to Kansas City. But I think there is something he can do to get just a little bit better. And that's Maikel Garcia. We're going to talk about him next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always check me out on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we dive into some news on Maikel Garcia, at least some takes on Maikel Garcia, let's give a shout out to today's title sponsor in Gametime. As I said, to open up the show, We'll be going to the game on Saturday. And where did I buy my tickets? I did it at Gametime. It is so easy to use. It's stress-free. Buy them now. Buy them at the last minute. Doesn't have to be baseball games. It can be concerts. It can be comedy shows. It really is my favorite app that I've ever used when buying tickets. And I'm going with the big group of people, so you never have to worry about, oh, are we sitting together? Who's going to be where? How much does it cost? What seats are open? Usually at Kauffman Stadium, it's pretty easy. But as I said, it's not just baseball games. You're going to a concert, sold-out environment. You never want to worry about people being split up or not getting the right price for your ticket. So Gametime is what I use to buy all of my tickets. So here's what you need to do. After the podcast, go and download the Gametime app, create an account, and use Locked On MLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On MLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I think at times when you're looking at Maikel Garcia, you're looking at this left side of the infield. We just want to rave about the potential there. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. right now leads all of Major League Baseball, every single position, and outs above average. And Maikel Garcia, who never played third base, is one of the best defensive third basemen in all of baseball. And the best thing about it is not only are they good defensively, they are having career years offensively. Now, I know Maikel Garcia had a very small sample size last year as a rookie. You could say he's more so rookie this year because he still had service time. But I would say Maikel Garcia is in that boat of he is really good. Like, if this is what Maikel Garcia is for the rest of his Royals career, I'm not going to complain about it. You have a guy that's fantastic defensively. He does enough offensively. But where you take Maikel Garcia from being a very good third baseman to an all-star level third baseman is, I think, something you have to work on in the offseason. So again, I'm not worried about the glove here. I'm not worried about the arm. But if you've seen Maikel Garcia's stature, it's not one that resembles a third baseman. It's just not one that resembles a third baseman in the American League and the National League. What do you think of what do you think of when you see a third baseman? Usually pretty big, bulky, 6'1", 6'2", 210 to 220 pounds. They're big dudes. Not every single one, but typically third basemen are big. I think like Jose Ramirez is the outlier in Cleveland. In Chicago, Yoan Moncada, he's a big dude. Okay, he is one of the bigger third basemen, I would say, in terms of muscle, pure size out there. Matt Chapman, he's not a super tall guy, but he's built pretty big. DJ LeMahieu in New York, I know he moved from second to third, but 6'4", 6'5". What I'm trying to get at here, Maikel Garcia is not the stereotypical third baseman. And I think it's very important for third basemen to do one thing offensively. Of course, you want to be a well-rounded player, but one thing I always want to look for in third baseman is what type of power they have. And I think for this offseason, if Maikel Garcia is going to stick at third base, I think you need to bulk him up a little bit. I mean, he's right now, I think, about 160. I think he's listed at 145, which doesn't sound right. That'd be nearly impossible for a guy 5'11", 6 foot. He is a very small guy in stature. But if you're going to play third base, there needs to be a little bit of bulkiness to you. Like right now, he has 4 home runs on the season. I mean, his numbers, like I said, they're not bad at all. He's had 309 at-bats, 278 batting average, OBP of 325, slug of 379. That I want to go up. An OPS of 703. He's got 18 stolen bases, 38 RBIs, 4 home runs. Where I think you can drastically improve him, right now Baseball Reference has him at 180, so they finally updated his weight. But he's at 180. I think I would almost go for a little bit more power and sacrifice the speed aspect of it. You bulk him up a little bit. Yes, it may cut down his stolen bases from 30 to 15 or 30 to 20. But if he adds 5 to 6 to 7 home runs next year, I like that from my third baseman. Now, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be your shortstop. There's no and ifs or buts about it. On the days that he has off, Maikel Garcia can slide over to shortstop. But I would love to see the Royals work out with him in the offseason, or him do this on his own time, or do this with a personal trainer. You're bulking up. You are bulking up to get to around 195, 200. That's the thing. I don't want him to just completely change his entire physique, where he goes from a small statured, speedy third baseman to just this hoss over there at the hot corner. You don't want that. I don't think that's beneficial for the Royals. But where he can get a lot better, because you look at the advanced numbers here, the hard hit rate, the barrel percentage, the expected batting average, the expected slug, all of that can point to one really good thing, is that he's got tremendous bat speed. Great bat speed. He's got barrel control. I'm going to add on here, barrel control. He's got a long list of things that he does really well at the plate. He's got a 12-game hitting streak right now. All of them are singles, though. And some are hard hits. Some have been little bloops in this Boston series. Some of them have been softer hit, but that's showing good barrel control. With 2 strikes, he can flick it the other way. But you improve the launch angle. You add some muscle to his frame. Then you are looking at not just a very good third baseman. You're looking at an all-star, because the metrics show at 6'180", he already hits the ball incredibly hard. He finds the barrel a lot better than most third basemen. He's got a great approach at the plate. He's not flailing and everything. And I just think you incorporate the bat speed, a little bit more muscle there. I'm okay to sacrifice some of the speed there. I'm okay to sacrifice a little bit of the stolen base aspect of him if it improves the power at the plate. Power is kind of the way of the game now. Now, Bobby Witt Jr., he's an anomaly here. Of course, he's a freak. He's going to swipe 50, 60 bags in a season, and he may have 25 to 30 home runs. That's just who he is. Maikel Garcia has to improve to get to that point. And that's where I think the Royals need to identify he is a part of this core. I think everybody already knows that at this point. But what can make him a well-known thing league-wide is once he taps in that potential. Because I don't know as a third baseman if 5 or 6 or 7 home runs are going to cut it. You improve that to 12 to 14. I think I really like what I'm getting out of Maikel Garcia. I'm not complaining about what he's shown this year. I'm not complaining about the guy that has come up to Kansas City, learned an entirely different position, become one of the best defensive players at his position, and is doing above average at the plate. Above average things at the plate. I can't complain about that for a team that has shown not much positivity. I mean, the left side of your infield is stacked. It's loaded. You don't have to worry about that one bit. But to me, there is still things you can do to improve that player. With Bobby Witt Jr., we've discussed this before. A thing he can do to significantly improve him, to turn him from an all-star to an MVP caliber type of player, he's got to walk more. The walk rate has to go up. That is a big-time thing for him to improve at the plate. Once he does that, it's going to be scorched earth for everybody else in the league because he does everything else at an exceptional rate. Maikel Garcia does a lot of things really well, but I think the power is still something that's going to lack a little bit. There is power in there for a guy with a frame of 6 foot, 180 pounds. You add 10 to 15 pounds of muscle in the offseason, I think we're seeing a totally different player in a good way when the Royals return to surprise Arizona in late February. So I have high hopes for him, but those are some of the ways I think he can improve and become even better for 2024. Before we go, let's take a quick look into what's ahead for the Kansas City Royals. They've got their series finale tonight against the Boston Red Sox. Austin Cox will be used as the opener against James Paxton, the former Seattle Mariner. Then they will be welcoming the St. Louis Cardinals Friday and Saturday at Kauffman Stadium. We'll have an off day on Sunday and then take on the Seattle Mariners, the red-hot Seattle Mariners, at home for another weekday series. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And don't forget, you can always check us out on the podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and you can find us on YouTube. We've had tons of subscribers over the last month, over 100 new subscribers in the last month. So be the next person to subscribe to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, let's look ahead as to what's on deck for the Kansas City Royals. They will be taking on the St. Louis Cardinals after this series finale in Boston tonight. They fell last night 4-2. Jordan Lyles threw a complete game, not a typical complete game. He gave up 4 earned runs. He also went 8 innings. So he did save the bullpen a little bit. That's important, which is probably why the Royals are using a bullpen game today, because it's so fresh. You can use Austin Cox for the first 2 innings. You can use Alec Marsh for 3. And then depending if you have a lead or if it's a blowout, you can go from there. But I'd imagine tomorrow that start is going to go to Angel Serpa. You don't want to do back-to-back bullpen days. So it could be Serpa, or you call up somebody from AAA Omaha. I know Anthony Veneziano's had a pretty good stretch for the Storm Chasers, but he did struggle in his last outing. I think when you look at somebody like a Jonathan Bolin, I'm not sure that he's quite ready just yet. There's a couple different ways that you could go with this certain spot for the Royals rotation. Because in this spot, with Zach Greinke on the injured list, guys struggling, you need to get a lot of innings for different guys. I like Austin Cox in the bullpen, so I don't think he's going to take that spot from Greinke. Is Angel Serpa built up enough to take that spot on Friday? It's a lot of question marks, which is why, a lot of people last night were complaining about Jordan Lyles still getting starts. They just need innings at this point. You got 45 games to go. It doesn't really do you any good to cut bait with Jordan Lyles. He's got to go out there every 5th day. But the Royals have injuries left and right. Guys underperforming. Alec Marsh can't hold a spot in the rotation. Daniel Lynch is hurt. Zach Greinke's hurt. The only 2 constants are Cole Reagans and Brady Singer in terms of pitching every 5th day and being pretty good every 5th day. And Jordan Lyles was Jordan Lyles last night, and I think maybe even above average Jordan Lyles standards. So I'll take that from him. But the other 2 spots, you're going to have to try a couple different things. You're going to have to mix and match a little bit there. Can you go with somebody like Anthony Veneziano Friday night rivalry game against the Cardinals? No, it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and you want to see what he's got. But there's just not much to choose from. I thought it was interesting on Twitter the other day. A couple people were debating in my mentions, and I always welcome it. I like to have the back and forth. I think good conversation is always welcome for a team that maybe for the rest of the baseball world doesn't deserve a lot of conversation. But people are debating, Brady Singer, he should be moved to the bullpen of the rotation. I'm not going to argue for Brady Singer being moved from the rotation. I think he could be a good bullpen guy. But my simple question is, if it's not Brady Singer, who are you turning to? Right? If it's not Jordan Lyles, who are you turning to? And these next 45 games, I think for me, I'm more of a baseball sicko, if you will. I'm more entertained and excited to see what they piece together. There are guys that I think they want to give a chance. There are guys I think once September rolls around, they want to give innings to. I just don't know if there's somebody out there right now that's pounding at the door. And that is a legitimate future help to the big league team. That's the thing here. To me right now, Brady Singer and Cole Reagans, they're future fits for the team. I don't think there's anybody else in the rotation, not here, not in AAA Omaha, that is going to be a long-term fit for this team. So does it really matter to force somebody up there? I don't know. Now, I'd like to get a split tonight in Boston. I'd like to see a good outing from Austin Cox. Alec Marsh has really been struggling over his last couple starts, fighting his command again, giving up the long ball like he typically did in the minor leagues. So can't be too shocked by that. But I don't know. At this point with the bullpen, the state of the bullpen, the state of the rotation, you're just trying to fight through it and then readdress this, figure it out in the offseason. I'd imagine maybe before the Cardinals series that Joe Barlow gets the call, who they acquired off waivers. He was DFA'd by Texas. I'd imagine they give a shot to Nelson Velasquez in the lineup, Devin Mann, guys like that. I'd imagine Veneziano comes up. I'd imagine Jonathan Bolin comes up, Jackson Kowar, James McArthur. They're going to try to filter in some guys. They're going to try to fix some guys. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a let's crawl to the finish line type of deal. They've been really banged up in the rotation. When they have been healthy, it hasn't been very good. I mean, Brad Keller's down rehabbing in Arizona. I don't know if it makes sense at this point to give him any more innings in Kansas City. I don't know if it makes sense to throw Jackson Kowar out there. I mean, he hasn't given you much. You can't do back-to-back bullpen games, so that's what I'm very curious about when looking ahead here. If the Royals get into a slugfest tonight in Boston, they'll probably have to bring up somebody. That's how I think this goes down. If Austin Cox gets roughed up and Alec Marsh gets roughed up and they're forced to use 3 or 4 more guys to get through that final game in Boston, I think I'd throw it out there just for the fun of it to say Anthony Veneziano starts tomorrow. I need to see actually when he did make his last start. It might be coming up here, so don't quote me on that. But to me, a lot of it goes down to the way this next week shakes out goes down to what happens tonight at Fenway Park. Bullpen gets roughed up. It's fresh right now, but it gets roughed up. Do you just give Angel Serpa the start? I can't say he's built up. He's coming off a season-ending injury. He's thrown 4 innings, 5 innings. Not much to work with. To me, I think you need to get somebody who's built up. And the Royals are scratching and clawing to find guys who are able to start for this team. It's going to be a readdressing situation in the offseason, but right now, I don't think we should be so nitpicky about who's getting starts, who's getting innings. It's a lost cause at this point. You hope for Reagans and Singer to finish strong. As for the rest, just keep it competitive. That would be my motto for this team in the final 45 games or so. So what's on deck? They got Boston tonight for the series finale, going for a series split in this 4-game set. Then they will welcome the Cardinals to Kauffman Stadium for a 2-game series, have a rare off day on Sunday, and then they will welcome the red-hot Seattle Mariners to Kauffman Stadium to begin next week. That is going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And don't forget those podcasting platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and you can always find us on YouTube. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.